Hello everybody, I'm Bill Amberg from Bill Amberg Studio. We are a studio based in Park Royal here in London, and we specialise in architectural installations, furniture and product, and in leather, using a lot of leather. And it's been a passion for me for the last 40 years. Next year it's my 40th year of the studio going strong. And we do a big variety of, as I say, furniture and product. And I've been asked to come and talk to you about using leather as a material in your furniture design. And it's been fascinating actually going around and talking to some of the people here and looking at what's on show and discussing with them their choice of materials. But one of the things that I thought, that the sadness I think was that there's a lot of misinformation around the use of leather and what is leather and why use leather and what are the properties of leather and is it a sustainable material, and a number of people who've come back and said, oh, I can't use leather because it's not sustainable, which is an interesting idea considering it's a byproduct of another industry. But we'll get onto that in a minute. I thought the other thing I would start with is just looking at the furniture upstairs. Pretty much all of it is made of wood. And I thought, okay, that's actually perhaps that's a good place to start from for this conversation. And I really encourage you to come and talk to us afterwards or ask any questions that you may have. We really encourage that. So I was thinking, why are people using wood? And what is it about wood that's interesting? And it kind of struck me that they are repairable, it's reusable, it's recyclable, and it has a fantastic afterlife. All of those properties are very similar to leather. It's sustainable, you would think. Wood is sustainable, and yet you cannot argue that the monoculture forestry farming of wood is a disaster. So there's a whole element of using wood and growing wood that's going to cause an ecological problem going forward. There's also lots of different types of wood. Would you consider using MDF, or would you consider using plywood? They're still wood, but they're full of hideous resins, and they're very bad for the environment. They don't have that repairable, reusable, recyclable benefit. But it's a different type of wood. So it kind of makes me think that a lot of this thing is about sourcing. It's about sourcing good materials from the best possible places is the key to any really beautiful product that you're designing and making. And that sourcing, the fundamentals of sourcing, is about your information. And information is about education, self-educating yourself, and therefore research. So before you start talking about anything or thinking about anything, do your research for your raw materials really thoroughly. And really try and understand, find the most appropriate material for your project. So kind of how does that relate to wood? How does wood relate to leather, and how do they interthink? So I think it's very fair to say that we all, as a globe, overeat meat. You know, there's vastly too many cattle being grown on our land and being fed the wrong sorts of food. And there are lots of similarities there with with pasture animals that are grown on a pasture and eat grass and are grass-fed pasture animals. Or you have the alternative, which is a feedlot animal that never sees the light of day, is pumped full of hormones, and is given the wrong sort of food to eat. There are two different types of cattle, and they're producing two different types of skin, and therefore two different types of leather. And if you've done your research, you'll be able to properly work out which of those two materials you want to use. So you've got the same thing there with the wood. You've got regenerative agriculture on one side, which is the growing movement of regenerating farmland, thinking about the soil. And then you've also got industrial agriculture on the other hand, where you pump the land full of nitrogen and pesticides to grow your crop. Now, I know which one I prefer, and I think that ultimately you guys probably do as well. And I think that as governments and bodies change and peoples change, we will move definitely in the regenerative agriculture direction. And that, I think, gives us the answer in terms of where does the future for materials lie? Is it in technology? Is farming about technology, or is farming about biology? And I would say probably about biology. It's about feeding the soil and regenerating the land that we have. And all of that involves animals. It's fundamental to regenerative agriculture is to have herbivores wandering around on the land, eating the grass and shitting everywhere and pissing everywhere and tramping on the ground and carrying seeds around. That's really, really fundamental to the food we eat and the wood that grows up out of the ground. So we need those animals. So therefore, what are we going to do with them? We're going to eat all of them, and we're going to use up every last bit of them in the best possible way we can. The value of a skin. Does anybody know the value of a skin of a standing animal? When I hear people say that animals are killed for their, cows are killed for their skin, utter nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Do anybody know what the value of the skin of an animal is, of a cow standing in a field? No, just the value of it to the trade. Nothing. Yeah, 1%. So nobody's going to grow an animal and kill it for 1% of its value. So it's nonsense. So there's a lot of facts that you guys need to kind of start to understand, I think. And that's just a perfect example of how there is this great misinformation around a material. In the same way as tanneries, the same way that food, saying that food is it's very easy and glib to say food is a byproduct of the industry, of another industry, but tanning is absolutely a perfect example of why it's a byproduct. Because the best tanneries grow up around food types. So the tanneries that we use, we probably only use 8 or 10 tanneries in Europe. They're getting pasture-fed animals from Europe. And even in Europe, you see this localization of food types leading to tannery types. So the best calf skins in the world come from France because they eat the most veal. The best buffalo skins come from southern Italy because they're making mozzarella. Heavy leathers, northern Europe, because we eat lots of beef. So that is how tanning has come. Tanning is the oldest continual industrial process to mankind. There are tanning sites in France that are 30,000 years old. And there's a very good reason for that, because it's incredibly strong. It's incredibly strong. It's still the strongest upholstery material that we can use. There's a good reason why it's used on planes and in trains and in cars, and that's because it lasts much, much longer than any other material. So if you want to make a piece of furniture that your family are going to enjoy, your grandchildren are going to enjoy, and you want to upholster it, think about upholstering it in leather. But when you think about leather, be careful about the leather choice that you make, because there's a hell of a difference between a feedlot farm cattle skin that comes from Brazil that's been fed on soya and a fabulous skin that comes from, Dorset that's been wandering around the field eating clover all day. They produce different skins, and you can tell the difference very, very clearly. The same with the tanning process. There's a lot of dirty tanneries out there. Sure, if you go to Bangladesh, sorry to name names, but if you go to Bangladesh, there's some really unregulated, shocking tanneries. If you go to the Amazon and you take their hardwood from the Amazon, you're committing the same kind of crime. It's no different. If you go to your woodland in Dorset and get your coppiced oak, that's fantastic wood. You should be using that. And in the same way as you choose your materials of your wood materials, you should be choosing your leather materials. It's an extraordinary material that has got all of these properties that you enjoy about using. But that's not even to say, I don't know how many of you actually make furniture here, physically make it. But if any of you played with leather as a material and actually start to work with it, it's also a beautiful material to work with. It's very sympathetic. It really does what you want it to do. It really gives back. And it's for craftsmen, it's a fantastic material to work with. I'm going to leave you with that, I think. But do please ask any questions. If any of you are ever thinking about using leather, I'd be actively encourage you to come to the studio. It's only in Park Royal. You know, get my details and come over and have a look, and we can talk about your projects and whether you want to use leather or not.